Hey, it's Jen Tanner from RCA Records, and this is the Unsigned podcast.
Jen, thank you so much for coming through. Glad we were able to connect in such a short time. I know you have a lot going on these days, not only moving around with the pandemic and work, but a bunch of the other, cool kind of initiatives that you're a part of that we'd love to talk about today. So again, thanks for coming through.
For sure. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. So one thing that I like to do at, kind of the start of these is really just make sure we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's extremely important that although it's not top of mind for everybody, that we spend a couple of minutes diving into it. So I know you're doing a bunch of stuff, in a whole number of areas. So kind of want to start there. Would love to get your, kind of overall thoughts on everything that's been going on within the music business, in regards to the Black Lives Matter movement. The other things that you're doing outside of that, I know you're doing a lot of female and women empowerment within the industry and a lot of stuff with the Latinx community as well. So yeah, would love just, your take and things that you're working on, any sort of causes or things that you want to shout out to, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously with this week coming up on Juneteenth this weekend, and you see a lot of corporations recognizing it and federally, but I still think there's a lot of work to be done besides that. I mean, it's been interesting seeing how many corporations and companies across the board, both in the industry and beyond, are saying that they are going to definitely be prioritizing more diversity and education and supporting Black creatives and Black entrepreneurs. But hopefully it's just the tip of the iceberg and not something that was a false promise. So, I mean, on our side, I think we're trying to make sure that that's upheld in a couple ways. One, like I think more than ever, and we can get into it a little bit later, but finding a little bit more about the brands that our artists are looking to work with, doing a little bit more homework on them than usual, and making sure that these are the type of brands whose values line up with our artists, and that we're not aligning them with somebody who kind of support other causes outside of their own beliefs. But I think outside of that, I mean, for myself, it's been a lot of listening to my peers and learning about what's going on. I think definitely, as you said, I want to make sure I figure out the best way to pay it forward, and have been doing a little bit of that through She's the Music, of helping like emerging people who want to get into the business and might be at the start of their careers and might not have the resources or connections or relationships, that trying to figure out the best way to introduce them to our side of the business, facilitate a lot of informational interviews with my colleagues who are I'm very fortunate to have people who are willing to donate their time, and kind of show them that like we are very much a family, but helping them make sure that they have the next steps for where they want to go. But hopefully more important stories come out of it, but celebrating the Black creatives that I know in my life and the colleagues, and figuring out the best way to help the future generation.
Yeah, well said. I think the thing that I really took out of that was just the listening piece. I think too often we're just like, hey, we read something somewhere and we want to be a part of the conversation and say this one thing, when now even more so, this is like a constant learning thing. It's time to like sit back and listen to our peers, who are those people, right? Those Black creatives that we know, those Black colleagues that we know, to be like, hey, how can I be an ally to you guys, to then go and share that information with the other people that may not know. I think that's extremely important to listen before we speak. So
yeah,
right.
I think also with the partnership side of it, it's sometimes tasking brands to do a little bit more and push them beyond a little bit more. I think there's a little bit more than just like the very capitalistic of pairing a face with a brand, but like really tasking and asking some of those hard questions of like, oh, well, what are you doing to forward the Black Lives Matter movement? And what can we do to make a real sustainable change and impact beyond just like the length of this 2-week launch of trying to figure out how to make something actual change?
Yeah. And I think what you do, you're at that crossroads, right? You have those artists that really care about those causes and are holding those brands' feet to the fire, because the brands want access to the fans. They want the cool factor with all the artists. but those artists, as long as they're like, it's not just about the check,
Yeah.
it really is about like, who are you? What are you trying to do? Like, does this align with me? And I think as long as we continue to push those brands, the narrative has just changed forever, because it's like, you can't go back. You can't say this now and then switch, because it's only going to hurt you. So it really, in the best case, it's like the win-win, right? It's the win-win at scale that like we're hoping to see and kind of push forward. And so it's on us just as much as it is on the brands to hold them to the fire, to be, those feet to the fire, to say, you got to come correct.
I completely agree.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you diving into that in the beginning of this as well. And would like to switch gears a little bit now and kind of get into the rest of the episode.
Sure.
But I want to start right at the top too. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got into the music business. I know you went to American in DC. Are you originally from there? I know you're kind of from the East Coast and the Midwest a little bit, and you're kind of everywhere now as well. So I'd like to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm actually originally from Indiana, born and raised. And then I went to college. I did my undergrad at American in DC. At the time, I really thought I was going to become like the next like ambassador to some Latin American country or next diplomat. And then my first semester at AU, I was in an international relations class, and I thought I was passionate about it until I realized like what people actually passionate about it are like. And it kind of like blew my mind a little bit, and it made me kind of take a step back and think about like, what am I obsessed with on that level that these people are obsessed with international relations? Cause like, that's not it for me. And when I kind of took a look back, it was my iPod at the time. Like that was where my free time was going. It was like discovering new artists, downloading music, going to shows. My first job in high school was working at an FYE in my local mall. Like, so that was it. It was definitely a rude awakening for my family originally, but they got past it. And I switched to a comms major at AU, but the nice thing about communications at American is they make you have a second major or minor, so you have something to communicate. And that's kind of where I got into music. And that's when I started doing a lot of internships, hopping around. I interned at Sirius XM. I interned at the 930 Club, a venue down there. I interned at a PR agency, and kind of just like try and figure out like where in the music industry I fit best. And then from AU, I graduated, I moved up to New York. I got my master's at NYU in music business. And a big part of that program is that you're interning while you're there. And my first semester, my law in the music industry class ended up being kind of like RCA 101. And Peter Edge at the time, Tom Corson, John Fleckenstein, Monica Cornea, it was insane the number of people we had speaking in this one class, all from RCA. So Tom Corson was lucky, I was lucky enough, he wrote the HR email on the chalkboard, and I reached out, and that's kind of it. I knew when I came to New York that when I found the part of the industry that I fit in, I was going to fully go for it. That first internship for me at RCA happened to be in strategic marketing, now known as brand partnerships. And I held on for dear life. I interned for a full year for the same team. And ultimately they found a weird way in for me that I was, for the first 2 years, half brand partnerships, half video promotion. And here I am. I worked my way up on it, and it's been a crazy ride, but feeling very fortunate.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. I mean, there's so many stories out there like that you just get the doors cracked just a little bit, and then you open it, you prop it open a little bit more with two jobs kind of for a while, and then that's awesome now. But I think what's really insightful about that too is off the rip knowing what you don't like. I think that's extremely important. When you're in college, you're that's not me. You think it, and then you get into it, and just like you said, you're around those other people who are that is their life, and that's their dream and goal, and that's what they're super passionate about, and off the rip yeah, I don't even want to fake the funk because I'm not there. I don't think I can get there. And I think a lot of people don't often do that. Like they sometimes say, well, I have to because, you know, I told everybody, my parents and yada, yada, that I was going to do this thing. So kudos to you.
And I thought I was passionate about it. Like I truly thought I was until you see somebody who actually is. And like, I think it's true in music. I think it's true in pretty much any industry. Like you've got to give it your all. Like natural passion is like an unthinkable advantage that you have. If you're not passionate about it, it definitely shows in your work.
Yeah. And that because you need that passion to get you through those shitty times, those hard times when like your career isn't really going there and you have to like really figure out how to make it work. And if you don't have that passion, you're just going to be like, and you're going to keep it moving. And so, yeah, I think that it's a very astute thing. So again, kudos to you to be able to like recognize that because I think that's, I spend a lot of time myself thinking about that. Like, what don't I want to do? Because that's going to help, especially as you get older, you start to better prioritize your time or think about prioritizing your time. And that's one of the things like, what don't I want to do? Okay. Yeah. So like, let me just get that out of the way. So I don't even go down that path.
Exactly. No. Yeah.
But go ahead.
You're good. You're good.
Okay, cool. But yeah, just like you said, that was kind of your in at RCA. You've been there for over 8 years now. You've worked on a ton of different projects across the board with artists like Kesha, Tate McRae, Khalid, SZA, brands like BMW, Dove, Bacardi. So I want to ask you kind of a twofold question. I normally ask it, hey, what was like, tell me your best story. But for you, I wanted to switch it up. I just thought of this and I think it's a more insightful question. Hopefully you feel the same way. But if you had to do one campaign over again, what would it be and why?
I think one campaign, and granted, like there's so many factors that go into this of what I'm about to say, but the campaign I would do over again isn't necessarily my favorite campaign I've done.
Right.
But it's been a great one. Was right when Khalid was still very much an emerging artist. He did this overarching program with Sony, which I think was a great program. It had a lot of looks in it for him. It was one of his largest deals at the time. But what I've learned now compared to when I did that deal, because that was so early on for me, is at that point, I think we were very focused on fulfilling brand terms and fulfilling deal boxes. And I think deals at this point are so much now about an artist's storytelling and making sure that whatever the brand partnership is blends with the artist's story a little bit better. That I think I would have like pushed a little bit on that because it was such a great platform. And Sony, I think, is such a strong brand from an electronic standpoint that really there was a lot of possibility and leeway. And looking back on it, I think that's when I would have liked to do a little bit differently because I think there could have been more creative ways to just make it a more engaging partnership that would have been more impactful. So I think now that I know a little bit to prioritize like the artist's story a little bit more rather than checking boxes for a check is really important. Yeah.
I appreciate you answering that question too. And that's kind of why I decided to steer away from like, what's your favorite? Because everybody has a favorite and that's like the win, but it's like, what can we learn? You know, you typically learn more from like the losses, so to speak. Or the ones that were like a great idea, but you're like, oh, we didn't execute it this way because we weren't thinking about X, Y, and Z, and it could have been that much better. And so I appreciate you digging into that. But yeah, the storytelling piece, I think, as we're seeing brand partnerships play out there, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, they've become so much more prevalent. There's so much more money on the line now, but the artists have a lot of that. They have the leeway. They have the room to say, no, if we're going to partner, it needs to make sense with whatever this project is about or whatever the song is about. Otherwise, otherwise it's just not going to hit. The audience is going to sniff it out and be like, nah, this is fake. You just did this for the check.
Exactly. Like we're very much living, I think, in a time where people really value authenticity and are quick to call you out if it doesn't work that way. That I think the like days of an artist like Vanna Whiting a bottle or a product are fully gone. And the way you like, the other part of it is like with any brand partnership, social asks are part of it. It's usually the part that's like my least favorite is chasing a social post. Why not make a partnership that makes the artist actually excited about promoting it and showing off what they've done? Like, the way you do that is creating a narrative and a story or a campaign that they're actually excited about, rather than being so brand forward and in your face, you know?
Yeah, it's just like, that's such low hanging fruit. And like, where's from like the artist and label side, it's like, hey, that's great that you're willing to put up a little bit of money, but like, it doesn't really move the needle for our artist. And that's what you're looking for when you're at like the highest level. You're trying to find those things that are really going to make sense for both people, so it's the win-win and not just the check, because like,
Agreed.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I think that's a great segue and kind of the next part of the next line of questions I have for you, which is a little bit more about your day-to-day stuff, and kind of how your job is really about doing that research to find those great stories. So I want to start right at the top. What does your day-to-day look like,
Sure.
I guess in 2020, 2021 as well, coming out?
Well, I mean, regardless, I think my days largely kind of split up into a couple buckets. Like, on one side, me and my team were sitting in artist meetings and marketing meetings internally, learning about an artist rollout, their campaign, thinking about, when it comes to those rollouts, where could a brand fit in? Or could a brand help offset costs? Like, how do we help amplify it and introduce an artist to a new audience via our brand partners? We're also getting to know an artist's natural brand affinities and who they're into and who they want to work with, or like what crazy ideas do they have where we can come in and help. On the flip side, we're speaking to a lot of brands and agencies, both existing partners and seeking new partners to work with. For the brands that already kind of have a music strategy, a lot of it is talent suggestion, and a little bit of matchmaking, hearing what they have going on, knowing what we have going on, and trying to figure out how we can blend them together. But then there's also a lot of brands that we want to work with that haven't worked in music before. So it's then kind of like that education process of showing them what a partnership with an artist could look like, and partnering with a label as a whole could look like. And those are the relationships that take time. That it's also a lot of like follow-up meetings, hearing what they're into, sending some concepts, riffing off of one another, and kind of building those relationships organically. So it's a mix of all of those. And then a lot of just, my favorite part of the job is just internal brainstorms with our team of saying, hey, like, on both sides, like, hey, we have this brand that sounds down to work with us, but this is like what they're going after. This is their issue or their problem that they're trying to solve. Like, how can we help them get there? And similarly with an artist, if an artist is trying to shoot a content series or find event partners, who can we like weave in organically to really blow this out of the water and make it happen? So that's our day to day, but I really like it because it's not monotonous. In 8 years, no two deals are the same. It forces you also to kind of use the creative side of your brain to come up with those ideas and where can brands fit in, but also the business side of your brain when it comes to like negotiating contracts and legalese and stuff like that I feel like I have like an unofficial law degree from all of this. But like, I like that it kind of forces you to use both sides, and the work is definitely like always changing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anytime you get to tap into the creative piece of it, it's always fun.
It's the best part.
Yeah, because it, just like you said, it's different every single time, and that's what makes it fun, right? If it was the same thing every day, if you were just accounting numbers, hey, no knock to the accountants because we need them, but it's definitely a tough job to read spreadsheets all day. So I hear you. One thing that you briefly touched on there was just research, and I'm sure you guys do a ton of that. And ideally, you want to make sure that the artist and the brand are a good fit for one another. So, can you just spend a little bit more time talking about the importance of research, especially for younger artists who don't necessarily have that value yet? Because a lot of times it's the up and coming artist. Oh man, my music's amazing and I would love to do something with Nike or Adidas or some alcohol brand, but they don't really have the value. They don't understand that, like, hey, you have to bring something to the table. What are you bringing to the table? Just saying you have great music, unfortunately, doesn't work in this space because everyone's got great music, right? At this level. So yeah, can you talk a little bit more about research and finding, those inroads to make it make sense for both parties?
Yeah, I think a lot of the research on the artist side is showing partners on the brand side, like not only demographics, like everybody can be Gen Z, sure, or millennial. Like you can make that happen, but I think it's kind of digging a layer deeper and showing who those fans really are. Like, are they like, where do they hang out on a day-to-day basis? What are they watching? I mean, we're fortunate on the Sony side, and there's a few other tools out there that artists can look into, like Chartmetric and things like that, that really show like not only are these the artist fan bases, but these are the brands that those fans are interacting with on a day-to-day basis. This is where they're hanging out. Are they more of like a skate scene? Are they more of party kids? Are they like, there's a lot of different demographics, to be honest, that we also show and break down our roster to brands on that side in different ways. Cause like you think about RCA, that's a roster of 200 artists that outside of our teams internally, like we know those backwards and forwards, but nobody else is going to. Right. So we try to find ways to make it more digestible for them, of breaking it down and by parents, by artists with LGBT audiences, artists who are really passionate about wellness and fitness, gamers, like things like that. But like trying to show through research, like this is how engaged an artist core audience is. And this is like really like who they are. And this is what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And whether it's through a content piece that like kind of taps into that, or an event, not necessarily in New York or LA, but like a market that might be a tertiary, a secondary market for a brand, but like they'd get a lot of noise out of it because that's where an artist core is, I think is really impactful. But similarly, I think the other thing is showing an artist that a Nike deal isn't going to happen overnight. An Adidas deal rarely happens overnight. And I think part of it is also showing them that while there's a definite research and data you can show behind it, part of it is showing that you're champions of the brand, and like we can start to build that foundation little by little. Probably we'll start with seeding, but also like don't be afraid to tag them in a social post every now and then, because that's where our team is capturing not only the post itself, but we can go back and find the engagement on a post like that and show it to them like, hey, they're like real big fans of you. Like, why don't we figure out what we can do together as there's already that like natural brand affinity there. So I think like test the waters with it and see what you want to do. One thing we definitely tell our artists is look to see what other people are doing, look to see what your peers are doing and what you might be into doing. Because while we have our own ideas on our side, like we have some artists sending us DMs in our Instagram of brands that they really want to work with. And that gives us a great place to build from.
Yeah, well said. There's a lot that goes into the research from the artist end. It's like, don't just start throwing out brands. You also have to think about what you care about, where you spend your time, where your fans spend their time, and like how you can tap into it. And if you don't necessarily have that fan base just yet, it's thinking about the things that you do care about, right? Like if you like Nike or any other brand, right? How can you be the biggest spokesperson for Nike if you're trying to use that as the way to come up, right? To get noticed by them. You need to be like the craziest, unique Nike person, right? Where you're taking old Nike stuff and repurposing it and, you're creating a whole new thing out of it. That is something that's like different and shows the brand like, oh my goodness, like this artist is incredible. Like they're definitely on our radar. That's how you get on somebody's radar, by giving yourself to them, right? Like in the right way, right? In the best creative sense, like
like we're not trying to cannibalize them from a competing deal, but like if you are full Nike or like you're full Pepsi, like I wouldn't post that much about Coca-Cola if you're like a passionate Pepsi drinker, for example. So like really make that own to you. And if we're lucky, we'll start doing building blocks as you're on your come up and they can help you there. But also by the time if something larger were to happen, it's also the kind of thing that like fans were like, oh, of course that's going to happen. Like they've been posting that they're fans of Pepsi the whole time. Of course they're going to like be down to work with them. Like that's exciting.
Right. And that's what gets the fans excited about, just like you're saying. They're like, oh my God, I'm gonna go buy that specialty Pepsi bottle because like it's from Jen and Murph. Like those guys always loved that as, on the come up. They were always drinking that and made songs about it or whatever. Like that's when fans want to hop on the bandwagon. So yeah, well said. Kind of along the same line here, artists are now brands, right? But especially up and coming artists, they don't necessarily think of themselves that way. They don't think of the value add, right? How can you add value to a fan's world and to their life outside of just music? So if you don't mind, I would love to get your take on that. How do you think artists can add value to fans' lives outside of music, right? And I like to think of this from like an email list standpoint, right? Every artist is like, an email list. Like, I'd rather just be on social media. Email lists outperform social media, in a lot of the engagement metrics. Yet a lot of artists don't use them because they don't think of it the same way H&M would, right? Where you're going to email a whole bunch. They're just like, well, I don't have new music, so I'm not going to email people. And so there isn't that engagement there. So how can artists add value to fans' lives outside of just music?
Outside of just music, I mean, I think while artists definitely are brands in some sense, I think a lot of what we spend our time thinking about as a team is that they're also humans. Like, well, I think a lot of fans obviously hold some of their favorite artists on a platform. Like for some, at the baseline, there is some relatability that probably makes you want to like that artist. Either you resonate with who they are as a person or their lyrics. But I think one way that I think there's a lot of way to add value to fans' lives is showing a little bit of behind the curtain of your personality and what you're into. I think that's actually where our team comes in a lot, of showing that other side of an artist, while our digital and our streaming teams and a lot of our marketing teams, rightfully so, are focused on the music. Like where Layla and I come in is a little bit of focusing on some of those other personality pieces that get an artist to get to know, for fans to get to know their artist on a different level. For example, like if an artist is really into wellness or meditation, like share your practice with your fans. If you're really into fitness, maybe share your routine. Or if you've been struggling in COVID for this past year, like everybody has in some way, shape, or level, like share kind of those thoughts and what you're going through, because I think that's also the kind of way that while you're doing great things, like fans can kind of relate to that on a certain level. So I think that's one way to provide value. But then on the flip side of it, I think it's really important that artists use their platform to talk about whatever causes they are passionate about, like be it sustainability. Obviously, we touched on the Black Lives Matter movement at the top of this, but like showing, like telling fans what you're passionate about and why, and resources. I think artists have this unique opportunity to speak their mind in ways that some other celebrities don't, because it can be said such an eloquent way that obviously music has the power to really create change and really impact culture. But I think there's something that artists telling their fans what they're passionate about, both on a day-to-day level, from something simple like what drinks you like, to really impactful change of like which causes you're passionate about. Like that's something that fans do listen to.
Yeah, I think, again, so well said about just like peeling back the curtain a little bit and showing more your personality, not the finished music video product that's like highly produced or just more produced. Like it's about having just a personal interaction with somebody and sharing, hey, this is what my workout routine is, or this is what I'm doing this weekend, or here's some cool things that I found. I think that's like, imagine if your favorite artist did that. It like a great example is probably 10 years ago when Kanye had his blog, right? During the height of the blog era, he was literally in there like every day. And that was like his Tumblr that was still popping. Instead of doing Tumblr, he just did his own blog. And so people were checking for that. And that was just like amazing. No big artist has really kind of done that sense in that way. It's now, obviously there's so many other mediums to do that, but just being able to share those insights makes it more relatable. And yeah, just like you said, that goes a lot farther these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said. Obviously, like every artist has like glossy press photos and photoshops,
Right.
but like you take an artist like Lizzo, for example, and she's become
Yep.
so relatable just because what she's posting on TikTok is authentic to her. That's why like
Yep.
she had a bowl of fruit and pomegranate seeds go viral just because she shared that with her fans, which is crazy. But I think fans like to just get to know like their artist stories. I mean, we just launched a content piece with Fouché and Lyft, and before she was fully an artist, she used to be a Lyft driver. So I think that's like a very authentic story to tell, just because like she used to play her own music for the people she was driving around, and now she's on the radio. And it's just like a very authentic story that I think fans want to be able to see and get to know the people behind the music outside of just whatever is on Spotify and whatever press photos being serviced out. People want to get to know the person behind the artist and the person behind the music.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's so cool. I want to talk about new projects and a little bit peel the curtain back on this side of things. Some insights on what your process is like when you start a new project, and are there any insights that you can give to up and coming artists for actually mapping out a rollout? Oftentimes you don't have resources, you've never done this, you're young, you're just like, you make a song and you put it up and it falls flat, and then people are like, oh shit, and then they get discouraged and then they stop making music. And so I like to kind of ask this line of questioning just to give people some game, give them some like real simple tips. Like, do you use Google Sheets? Like, do you start a certain period of time out? Like, oh, if I want to release a song at this particular time, I schedule things out, 6 weeks in advance so I can kind of build on things. Would love to get your take on, just kind of how far out people should be planning, especially for up and coming artists.
I mean, I personally think the more time, the better. And part of that is just giving people a chance to get to know you. Of if you are looking to make introductions, build those relationships with people prior to the music coming out. So if they get to know you on a personal level, once you release music, it then becomes easier for them to promote you. Like, they'll already be familiar with the name. I think Google Docs is something that we definitely use internally. I mean, even when we have an artist coming out with a new project, we'll hear collectively as a team what the creative is behind it, but then each of us kind of take that bit and then add our own ideas of what could work based on what team we work on. So I think that is super helpful. I also would say that one thing that there's like a few things to keep in mind. I think for an emerging artist, like baseline before going into a new album or campaign, like for an emerging artist, it might also be the first time that you're being introduced to the world. Like, think about like, what is your artist proposition? Like, who are you and what sets you apart from the rest? It's literally an elevator pitch for yourself of like, who are you and why should people care? I mean, I think that's like a lot of what our job is, especially with brands with budgets. It's giving people a reason to care and want to listen and check them out. And I think kind of with that, part of it is knowing who your audience is. Like, who are you going after and how can we get to those people a little bit better? Like, to just go to the masses is like a very hard thing to do. And that's probably when you're going to fall flat. But if you're like, hey, like, we're from Brooklyn, we're very like much born and raised here, like start there and become like the biggest name in Brooklyn, or even the biggest name in your neighborhood in Brooklyn, and kind of like start growing, but figure out like who you're marketing to, and who you want to reach with whatever release it is, and kind of build some of that album rollout and an album campaign around that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's about going deep in the beginning, like just whatever your thing is, however unique you are, embrace that and just go really, really deep on that, and then start to build that out, and then go wide from there.
Yeah, start to build, like figure out who your core is, engage your core and make sure that they're excited. And then like little by little, you start tapping into bringing in other audiences. Maybe it's other artists who sonically are the same as you, or geographically are from the same place as you, or artists that you've been wanting to dream to work with one day. How do you start like tapping into their audiences? Like just figuring out how you kind of like build that core little by little.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Kind of along the same line of questioning again here is, you talk with a ton of different brands. Social media is so big now, but a lot of times artists think that they have to be everywhere at all times, and that can just lead to such burnout, and no real work getting done, right? A lot of wasted time. So we'd love to get your take on where you think up and coming artists should be, given what the big brands are looking at. Is there one specific platform you think they should be on? I tend to think that artists should be great at like one or two platforms. My insight's like, be great at one or two, get the name if you want, like log on, create an account for any new thing that's popping up so you can have your name and so you can just kind of keep it there, but you should only focus on one or two. So that way you're just like, you're saving yourself the time and hassle. So we'd love your take on that and kind of like what you see brands looking at most.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. I think you should have an account across all of them, because you never know like when you're going to want to lean into one or the other. But I think figure out what works well for you. Are you more visual? If so, maybe it could be Instagram or TikTok. But if you just want to speak your mind, like we have so many artists whose core fans are on Twitter because that's just how they resonate best. Like figure out what works for you. I do think no matter who you are, there is an important need to have consistent conversation with your fans. That just figure out what platform that is for you that makes it easy for you to do so. But I think consistency is key. So if you can become a master at one or two, that's a great place to start. But I do think it's important to have an account across all of them, because you never know when you might want to lean into the other for some way, shape, or form.
I think, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was going to answer the second half of your question, so keep going.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say on the brand side, I will definitely say that like TikTok is what everybody is asking us for right now. And it's interesting because I think there's some artists who lend themselves really well to it and have become masters at it. Like one great example, I think on our roster is this artist, MC Hope, who's a little bit more, he's a singer-songwriter, but like he got his whole start by, he would have fans send him in lyrics and he would kind of make riffs and songs in his car based off of what he was sent. So he really leaned into that like interaction element of it. A little bit different also than what you see with so many people doing dances and things like that. And I think there is a lane for it, but it was really cool seeing him use the platform in such a unique way. But then there's other artists who brands are very insistent on TikTok and they're like, that's not me. Like it's not natural. And if you want to reach my fans, if that's the purpose of this whole conversation, like that's not where they are. So I think you were spot on of letting an artist be a master at a couple of platforms, but like figure out which one it is and let a brand lean into whatever platform they're natural on.
Yeah. You hit on two great things again. It's like pick one, right? The one or two that you actually like to do. Right. Because that makes it easier to be like, oh, this is fun. This is more natural to me. And then therefore it's just like the great feedback loop. But then secondarily, it is about consistency. It is about like engaging with those apps like crazy, right? Like liking, commenting, sharing other people's stuff too, to help like on the come up every time. A lot of times artists are just like, I just want the viral moment. And it's like what I try to explain to people is like, that is lightning in a bottle, right? You can't predict when that's going to happen. You're better off trying to be consistent, really engaging with a fan base until you find something and then rinse and repeat. Then you do it. And that's how you scale up. And if it is about, tapping in with other audiences, that is still a skill and that can be done. It's about finding the other accounts that you want to work with and figuring out a great piece of content to create with them and then reaching out and adding value. I think that's a great way to kind of get into the brand partnerships world, right?
Yeah. And that's how you grow your fan base and keep them engaged, is by consistently posting content. Like few accounts are just there solely to say, hey, new release is coming, or only putting official content out there. Like the way they're going to show up when you have something new coming out is that you've been talking to them all along. And so they're excited to see you succeed. But rather than you just using it to make announcements, you really kind of want to create a conversation and a dialogue with them.
Yeah, the one to many of the old school media realm is just like it's not there anymore. There's very few artists that are able to do that, and it really is the top tier of the top tier.
Yeah.
Beyonce, Bruno Mars, Jay-Z, like those people don't necessarily need to have the conversation; they can just say it. But even that, it's still getting it's. There's only Eminem, like there's only a couple of people that can really do it, and so
Yeah.
that people shouldn't look to that as like, hey, this is the way. It's a much different landscape now. So yeah, couldn't agree more. All right, well, coming down to the end of the combo here, the end of the time that we have, but I wanted to get your take on a couple of things before you head out. One, would just love to learn what is, maybe it's a campaign that you've worked on or something else that's out there, but what's like your most favorite recent digital campaign? And then the last year has been kind of tough, but I'll still ask it anyways. Your favorite, kind of recent real world in the real world campaign as well.
Sure. My favorite digital campaign that we recently worked on is we just launched Tate McRae's first brand partnership ever with Essential Water at the top of about mid-May. I think it came out about a month ago now. And it's her opposite Patrick Mahomes, which is sick. And this violinist Azima. And I think for her, that one was exciting because she's the kind of artist that, like, obviously she's having a breakthrough year. I'll give my work plug. She came out with a song with Khalid today. It's great. But like to have an artist like her, like even like work with Patrick Mahomes, I think was like something that was just so exciting for them. I mean, it was the kind of thing that even I remember when we left that shoot, like going into it, she was like fine with football. She knew who he was, but like after just interacting with somebody of that caliber, like she left that shoot like totally enamored, very inspired.
She's like, I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm a Chiefs
fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. She like was just like very taken to, like he was so humble and he was so nice and chill and talked, and like he had like, I forget what kind of car it was. He had some really nice car outside, and she was like, I think I want one of those one day. And I'm like, didn't you say you failed your like driving test like 3 times? But like you could clearly tell like she was like very much impressed by just like him as a whole, and like how you can still be humble at a superstar level, like the peak of your career. That was really cool to see. And I really like that Essentia, while this first phase of the partnership has been more brand forward, that they were still kind of like leaning into her dance background and letting her tell her side. And then we're digging into the second phase of it now. And kind of what I said before, like the thing that I really like about this partnership is that they really want to start digging into her story more and figuring out like what she wants to get across. So I'm excited about that one. And the first phase of it was just really great to kind of put her on next to a peer like Mahomes. But I think like getting into her story is going to be really exciting.
That's awesome. And just to jump in there for a second too, like I think what I think is great is that it's a water brand, and a lot of times they're like, oh, people don't water, it's more like alcohol and music, and that's like the fun night out. But we've seen that story for so many years, for so long, and there's a lot of like downsides to that. You know what I mean? Like there's like you can't drink every night on the road. Like this is a job. You gotta prepare yourself for shows day in and day out, and it is about taking care of your body and taking care of your mind. So I think like those sorts of partnerships are great. It's always like the thing that always bothered me, like with those brand partnerships and athletes. You were talking about Pat Mahomes for a second, but like anytime like Jordan or LeBron did like soda commercials, I'm like, they'd have these like commercials where they hop off the court and they're drinking a Sprite. It's like nobody's fucking doing that. You're drinking like water and at best Gatorade. No one is chugging a carbonated beverage after a basketball game. And
that's true.
I just always thought they were like so tone deaf. I was like, guys, why are you even saying this? You should just not, this should be a completely different thing. And over the years they've like changed it a little bit, which is good. But random
that's a very good point.
Hate.
Yeah. No, but I think that's part of it, that like we see so many ways where like an Essentia could fit. I mean, granted, Tate is 17, so she's not going to be working for a while, but like it's also the kind of thing that like she's going to be on tour, she's going to be at rehearsals, like it's something that like water's part of her day-to-day life, that it makes sense. But one last thing, it has I'm not going to go on this tangent because I know we're wrapping up, but the whole other topic of seeing that obsession between artist and athlete is something that I never get tired of, because it's so fun to see them fan out on each other. And this was just like one take of it, but that to me is something that is like fascinating and I love seeing in person.
Yeah, because they become kids again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like each person is just like, oh my God, like I know I'm great at what I do, but like what you do, I could never do that. And that's awesome to see that. That's awesome to see. But your favorite recent real live campaign.
Real life and is really hard in COVID.
Yeah, I was gonna say the last year, maybe go back the last like 2-3 years, like it doesn't necessarily like super recent, but
there's two that come to mind. The biggest one, which is the one that I always like say has been my favorite to work on, was Khalid and BMW at Coachella 2019. Just because he spent part of his life growing up in Germany, and like his mom drove a BMW, so for him there was like very much an authentic love. And the iconography to his last album, Free Spirit, was like an old school van. So to then have BMW come in, allow him to wrap like 30 i8s in the design of his choice. And then they were driven throughout Coachella Valley, like throughout the first weekend of the festival, by a bunch of influencers. It was really cool. And like we coupled that with an event where we had the bus and the car there. Khalid show up, got to see some fans, but that one was one where like I didn't even make it to Coachella that year, and I could feel it from New York. Like, so that one was really special.
Yeah, that's really cool when you get something that means so much, because he's such a nice kid. You could, I could see it from a distance that he like those types of things mean something to him. He's like, oh yeah, it's cool that it's BMW, it's a partnership, but it's also like, I just like the brand, and it's great to like get to do something with them.
Yeah, he drives one to this day. So that one, I think that one will forever, I think, be like, up until now, my career has been my favorite. The other one that is not on as large of a scale, but I really enjoyed, was Halloween 2019. We did a Kesha Jack Daniels event, which was just fun for me while it was in real life. It was Halloween, which is great. She showed up as an octopus. Awesome. But like, it was the first time Kesha had formally worked with Jack Daniels, and like TikTok, I mean, her first song, she talks about brushing her teeth with a bottle of Jack. That like, that was just a cool moment to bring together in real life. And that was a way we did album playbacks by doing a listening tree of putting headphones in trees for people to get a chance to listen to. And given that the release was around Halloween, everybody went far out. And it was the kind of event, again, like they had set up a private area where she could hang out, but she enjoyed the event that we curated so much with her that she was like out, and she ended up playing unreleased music, which was like a moment for us. And we were like, no, you can't do that quite yet. But she did it anyways. But like, it was both examples where campaigns where artists went above and beyond because they were just so excited to be a part of it. And like what we made was something that really resonated with them.
Those are the best. That win-win where like even the artist is like super happy. Not, oh, we had this idea and it didn't really come out the way we planned. It was like, no, we really executed that. Those are the best. That's awesome.
Agreed.
Safe to say you're ready to get back to those real life campaigns.
I cannot wait for my first concert. I don't know what's going to be quite yet, but I'm ready.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, we are coming down to time. Wanted to get these last two questions out for you though. What are you working on that you're super excited about? And if you don't mind, where can people get at you?
Sure. The two artists that I'm so excited to be working on right now. First one, Tate. I just mentioned her, but like have rarely met an artist who has such that humility to her and that humbleness, that she's vocal and she's like very active in deals that I think is exciting to see. So to see her come up, like, it's great to see somebody so grounded and wanting to learn about the business side as much as the music side. And the fact that she's 17 is absurd, that she has such a maturity to her. So I'm definitely excited about her. And then the other one is Fouché. Like, Fouché is such a unique artist with such a clear vision of what she wants to do creatively and musically. Like, some songs lean more R&B, some songs lean more alternative. But like with her, like, her creative is just insane. So those are two artists. Like, I personally really like working on the artists that are kind of like on that brink of going to the next level, that those are my favorite kind of projects to work on, and those are two of them. And then people can reach me either on my LinkedIn or my email, jen.tanner at RCA Records, or on Instagram, Jen Tanner 2, Twitter, same thing, Jen Tanner 2, you know how to find me. But always happy to pick brains with people and brainstorm together and see what new partnerships we can bring together. So definitely feel free to reach out.
So that's awesome. And yeah, I've been hearing a lot about Fouché, but I haven't jumped into the music yet. So I'm excited. After this, I'm gonna have to get in there.
Oh yeah,
check it out.
Definitely recommend it. She did a Depeche Mode cover that is insane. Highly recommend.
Oh my gosh, I'm in. I'm in. As soon as we hop off, I've been kind of bored with my Apple Music lately, so I'm like, I gotta find some new stuff to jump into. So
there you go.
Good to know. Well, Jen, I appreciate the time. Thank you for the insights, and yeah, we'll have to do another one next year when we're back in the real world, and hopefully some more fun stories to share.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll talk soon, Jen. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. See ya.